Okay, ready to dive in? Today we're tackling a Nova Scotia family court case, and let me tell you, it's got more twists and turns than a pretzel factory.
Oh, absolutely. This one really highlights just how complicated modern families can be, especially when you throw in relocation and that whole best interest of the child thing.
And let me tell you, the judge had their work cut out for him right from the get-go. We're talking about mom, we'll call her TY, and dad, AK, separated, sharing two young kids. CK is 5, little JK is just 3.
And to make things even juicier, mom decides to pack up and move to Economy, Nova Scotia. Dad, meanwhile, finds a new place, but stays put in Halifax.
Classic custody battle brewing, right?
Yeah.
Only now you add in the relocation factor. Mom wants the kids with her in economy, dad's fighting for primary custody or at least a shared parenting situation.
Which brings up a really interesting legal question. Did mom even actually relocate in the eyes of the law? I mean, dad moved too, even though it was within the same city.
It's not always black and white, is it? So how did the judge end up seeing it?
Well, after looking at everything, the judge ruled that, yep, mom's move to economy, that counted as relocation, legally speaking, the deciding factor. Distance. Economy to Halifax, that's a pretty significant hike. The judge figured that kind of move would make it a whole lot harder for dad to stay close to his kids.
Makes sense. It's not just about a new address. It's about how that move affects the kids' relationship with their parents.
Exactly. And since dad was still in Halifax, the judge said his move wasn't really relocation, not in the way that would seriously impact his time with the kids.
Okay, so that relocation ruling, did that give one parent an advantage when it came to the custody part of things?
Oh, it definitely threw a wrench in the works. Because now, that's where burden of proof rears its head. Basically, the judge had to figure out which parent needed to do a better job proving that their living arrangement was best for the kids.
Now, for our listener who might not be a legal eagle, can you break down burden of proof? What's that actually mean here?
Sure thing. Burden of proof, it's all about who has to do the convincing. In family law, the big thing is always the best interests of the child, right? So when a judge is trying to figure out custody, who lives where, they got to decide which parent needs to pile up the evidence to show that their plan is best for the kids.
So in this case, who ended up carrying that burden?
Well, that's where it gets even trickier. See, mom and dad, they had this informal agreement before they even went to court. So the kids were actually living in two different situations.
Ooh, okay, tell me more.
So CK, the older boy, he was splitting his time pretty evenly between mom and dad. But little JK, he was still breastfeeding, so he was mainly with mom, although he was spending at least one night a week with dad.
Wow, so the judge is trying to figure out burden of proof for two kids who are living different lives. Talk about a brain teaser.
Tell me about it. The judge even considered using different standards of proof for each child, just to be fair to their unique situations.
Which, I get it, right? We want what's best for each kid individually. But separating siblings, that's a whole other can of worms.
Exactly. That's kind of a last resort. Plus, both parents in this case, they both wanted primary custody. So to make things a little easier but still keep the kids' well-being front and center, the judge made a big decision.
What'd they decide? Did they use different burdens of proof?
They decided to keep it simple. They took the burden of proof that applied to CK, where mom had to prove moving to economy was in his best interest, and used that for both kids. That way, it was one standard for everyone, making the whole process a little less messy.
Sounds like the judge was really trying to find that balance. But this is just the beginning, right? We still need to unpack mom and dad's arguments to understand why the judge ultimately sided with dad.
Oh, absolutely. Mom's vision of life and economy and dad's emphasis on stability in Halifax, that's where things really heat up.
So mom's the one who had to convince the judge that economy was the place to be for the kids. What were her main points?
Well, she really played up her role as the primary caregiver, which, you gotta admit, was kind of true since dad's roofing job had him working crazy hours. She painted this picture of economy like something out of a storybook. 5-acre hobby farm, kids running through fields, learning about nature, going to the local school, the whole shebang.
Sounds idyllic, but did she actually talk about, working? Economy's pretty rural. Did she have a solid plan for work out there?
That's where things got a little shaky. She mentioned working from home till JK started school, which, okay, short term, maybe. But long term, no real details about her career plans, if she'd need to commute to Halifax, anything like that.
Yeah, the judge probably wanted some reassurance that she could actually support the kids out there. Okay, so farm life versus city life. What's dad's side of the story? Why did he think Halifax was the best place for them?
Stability, consistency, that's what he kept coming back to, and a good support network, which Halifax had in spades. He knew his roofing job kept him busy, but he really emphasized how close he was to his kids when he was home. Talked about the routines, the things they did together, all those special little moments.
So, proving he wasn't just an absent dad, even if his work was demanding, did he bring anything to back that up?
Oh, he did. He actually had a witness statement from his mom, MK, who, by the way, was the main childcare provider when Dad was working. Her statement talked about how close she was to the kids, how much she loved having them around, and that she was totally on board to keep helping out. That definitely scored Dad some points.
That's like having a built-in support system. Judges love to see that. Okay, but what about mom's whole economy pitch? Did dad have a counter argument for that?
He did. He wasn't blind to the appeal of economy, but he brought up things like healthcare, access to specialists, those kinds of practicalities.
Yeah.
The kids had a family doctor in Halifax, a dentist, all that. He argued that uprooting them would just mess up all that routine care.
Right? Got to think about those things, especially with little ones. Did he throw out any alternative living situations just in case the judge wasn't sold on the whole relocation thing?
He did, actually.
Yeah.
Two options, which I thought showed he was trying to be flexible. His first choice, kids live primarily with him in Halifax. Mom gets them every other weekend. Holidays, you know the drill. But he also said he was open to shared parenting if the judge shot down the relocation idea altogether.
So dad's case had layers. His bond with the kids, his mom's support, Halifax's perks, and even backup plans for custody. Did the judge pick up on any of that in their observations?
Absolutely. The judge definitely noticed that close relationship between the kids and their grandma, big check mark in Dad's column. And there's another little wrinkle. The kid's half-sister. She lived with Mom full-time.
The sibling factor, always got to consider that. Did the judge say anything about how that played into their decision?
There weren't a ton of details in the court documents about the half-sister's relationship with CK and JK, but the judge acknowledged that, yeah, if the kids moved in with Dad, it would change things for them, even if it wasn't the deciding factor.
Okay, so we've got mom's farm life dream, dad's Halifax stability plan. Two good parents, two very different visions. So who won?
Drum roll, please. After looking at all the evidence, all the arguments, the judge ruled in favor of Dad. CK and JK would be Halifax bound.
Wow. Sounds like those arguments about stability, support, and not messing up the kids' routines really resonated with the judge. What were the big things that tipped the scales?
One of the biggies. Remember how Mom had the burden of proof? Well, she didn't quite convince the judge that economy was better for the kids, not definitively. Sure, the farm might have sounded nice, but the judge wanted more than just a nice idea. They wanted proof that uprooting them was the right call.
Makes sense. Anyone can talk about fresh air and wide open spaces, but proving it's the best fit for those specific kids, that's a higher bar.
Exactly. And remember how we talked about Mom being kind of vague about her job situation? That came back to bite her. The judge even said that because they didn't have a clear picture of her work plans, her income, they couldn't be sure that her plan for the kids would actually work out.
Ugh, yeah, transparency is key in these situations. Did the judge have any other concerns about mom's relocation idea?
They did. The judge was worried about yanking the kids away from everything they knew. Think about it. Their friends, their routines, their grandma, their half-sister, all in Halifax. The farm was familiar, sure, but it wasn't home base. Moving them away from all that, it just seemed like too much disruption.
It's all about minimizing upheaval, especially for kids that young. This relocation thing really throws a wrench into the works.
For sure. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep shifting. And speaking of shifting, we can't forget about the financial side of things. Remember, this case had a whole other chapter when it came to child support.
Oh, right. Things took an interesting turn there. What happened with the child support part of the decision?
Well, you know how Mom was kind of hush-hush about her income?
Yeah, that became a problem when they had to figure out child support.
Uh-oh, never a good sign. Did the judge just let it go?
Nope, not a chance. They pulled out a little legal trick called imputed income to make sure the child support calculation was fair and realistic.
Imputed income. Okay, now you gotta explain. That one sounds kind of complicated.
It's actually pretty straightforward. Basically, if a parent's being shady about their finances, either because they're choosing not to work or work less, or they're just not telling the whole truth, the judge can step in and basically say, nope, we're going to assign you an income based on what we think you could be making. They look at things like education, work experience, the job market, that kind of stuff.
So in Mom's case, because she wasn't giving up the goods, the judge had to make an educated guess about what she should be earning. How'd they come up with a number? The judge looked at her master's degree, the fact that both kids were old enough for school or daycare, and the availability of full-time jobs in her field. Taking all that into account, they decided to use minimum wage as her income for the child support calculation.
Wow, so the judge isn't afraid to get creative to make sure the kids are taken care of financially. It's like they're saying, you can't hide from your responsibilities even if you try to play coy with your finances. So because of this imputed income, did mom actually end up having to pay child support to dad, even though she wasn't the one who got primary custody?
You got it. The judge used that imputed income to figure out the child support payments, and yep, mom was ordered to pay dad regularly to help support their kids.
It's amazing how all these different parts of the case are connected. Relocation affects custody, custody affects child support. It's like a chain reaction, and the judge is stuck trying to manage all the moving parts.
It really is. And I think it shows just how important it is for judges to look at these cases as a whole, considering all the angles and how each decision might affect everything else. What starts as a simple custody dispute can quickly spiral into something much more complicated.
This case has been quite the roller coaster. It really highlights how a decision about relocation can have a ripple effect on everything else. Custody, child support, you name it.
It's true, these cases are rarely simple. And it's easy to forget that we're not just talking about legal terms and rulings. There are real families at the heart of it all, trying to figure out a new normal.
It's easy to get lost in the legal weeds, but we can't lose sight of that human side. Two parents who love their kids, trying to make the best of a tough situation.
Exactly. And while it's our job to kind of break down the judge's reasoning, the arguments made, it's important to remember that there's no magic formula in family law. Every family is different, every case has its own quirks, and the judge has to sort through all that and try to find what's best for the kids.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into TYVAK, what are the big takeaways? What can our listeners learn from this, even if their situation isn't about relocation?
Well, one thing that really stands out is how important it is to be upfront about everything, especially money. Mom not being open about her income, that really hurt her when it came to child support.
Right. Trying to hide information or paint a rosy picture, it usually does more harm than good. What else should people keep in mind?
Evidence, evidence, evidence. Don't just tell the judge what you think is best for your kids, show them. Got documents about your living situation, your work, your efforts to make things work, bring them in. Witness statements from people who can talk about your parenting. Gold.
So it's about backing up your words with something concrete, something the judge can really sink their teeth into.
Exactly. And finally, I think this case shows how important it is to be flexible, willing to meet in the middle. Dad offering those alternative custody arrangements that showed the judge he was serious about co-parenting, about putting the kids first.
It's a good reminder that even though these legal battles can get heated, coming in with a spirit of cooperation, a genuine desire to find a solution that works for everyone, that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's about making sure both parents can stay involved in their kids' lives while making sure the kids' needs are met emotionally, physically, all of it.
This case really opened our eyes to the complexities of family law. Behind every case, there's a family going through a major transition. And like we've seen, it's messy, it's complicated, and the judge's job is to navigate all that with compassion and a focus on the well-being of the children.
Well said. Sometimes the real question isn't about winning or losing, but how everyone can move forward in a way that helps those kids thrive despite the upheaval.
Now that's something to think about. TYVAK, it's a reminder that family law cases, they're about so much more than just legal outcomes. They're about healing, about finding a new path, and about the enduring power of love, even when families change shape. That's all the time we have for today, but keep those brain cells buzzing, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.